조려 삼크며 고사 이어로 지포 니칭아트 시즈기 땡콘 승엔 이시가이호소 고세 그덕그호 조다이 시즈 세포 시시그 그여 입사이든 그서그시 덕그혼 간내 시츠조만 덕그이산가이호 녀든느게치 스단미흐쇼 간가그에릭 도시사이쇼선 싱안야코카 다이센호간도 고크쇼템닌 도진묘케.
Venerable members of the Sangha, distinguished guests, beloved community participating in the live stream, we welcome you to May We Gather, a National Buddhist Memorial for Asian American Ancestors. We extend our deepest gratitude to Higashi Honganji Buddhist Temple in Little Tokyo, Los Angeles, for hosting today's ceremony. As many of you know, just 2 months and 8 days ago, this temple was vandalized. We stand here now thanks to the groundswell of community support that has helped restore the temple. We also acknowledge that we are standing on Tongva territory. This stolen land has borne witness to the physical and spiritual violence of 5 centuries of colonialism, and it has also sustained indigenous rituals for countless generations. We pay respect to these native ancestors and to the tribal communities who, in the face of displacement and genocide, have maintained their religious practices to the present day. Today, May 4th, 2021, marks the 49th day since 8 people, 6 of them women of Asian descent, were killed in a mass shooting in Georgia. In many Buddhist traditions, the 49th day after death is an important moment of transition for both the deceased and the bereaved. Our collective grief is likewise shaped by the horrors of the coronavirus pandemic, which has claimed the lives of over 3 million people around the globe, including nearly 600,000 Americans. The virus continues to ravage communities across this country and in South and Southeast Asia, laying bare the violence of domestic and global inequities. The virus has also been used as a racist justification for many of the recent incidents of anti-Asian violence. Indeed, racial animus against Asians in the United States and beyond has long been shaped by fears of contagion. Our bodies have been unjustly blamed for the work of microscopic vectors. We wish that everyone who wanted to be here in person could join us. The virus has made this impossible. Here in this temple and across the country online, we will make merit together today. Even though we must be physically distanced, our united intention brings us together in spiritual community.
Our gathering brings together American Buddhist leaders from Chinese, Japanese, Khmer, Korean, Taiwanese, Tibetan, Sri Lankan, Thai, and Vietnamese Buddhist traditions. We will chant sacred texts, transfer merit to Asian American Buddhist ancestors, and pray for the peace and protection of all beings. We will share 6 Dharma messages on each of the paramis, or Pāramitās, the perfected qualities of awakened beings. We gather as Asian American Buddhists and allies in an expression of our fundamental interconnectedness. We do not suffer alone, nor do we heal alone. Only when we join together as a Sangha can we truly support each other's freedom. When our Chinese immigrant ancestors came to these shores in the 1850s, we faced exclusion and violence, our Buddhist and Taoist temples desecrated and set ablaze. When our Japanese American forebears were herded into US concentration camps in the 1940s, our priests were classified as a threat to national security, our Buddhist faith deemed un-American. When our South and Southeast Asian parents and grandparents arrived in this country in the 1970s, many fleeing wars inflamed by the American military, we were told our cultures and Buddhist traditions didn't belong. In the face of nearly 2 centuries of xenophobia and systemic violence, Asian American Buddhists have long joined together to rebuild our communities. Piece by broken piece, we sutured the jagged edges of altars, statues, incense burners, and our very bodies and minds back together. This mending is part of our Buddhist practice in America. Each act of rejoining reveals how compassion can arise out of racial suffering, how fragments are inseparable from wholeness. We mend them as a declaration of our interconnectedness, as an expression of gratitude to our ancestors, and as a way to cultivate the karmic conditions for American Buddhism's continued flourishing. As we confront yet another wave of violence, vandalism, and exclusion targeting Asian Americans and Asian American Buddhists, let us honor our ancestors by continuing their legacy of gathering and mending.
We would now like to share a short video of Elliott and Robert Peterson recalling memories of their mother, Yong Ae Yue, a Korean Buddhist killed in the Atlanta area shootings. Their words are a powerful reminder of the impact of violence and discrimination on an individual and family level.
She was a funny woman, she was a phenomenal woman, and she was a family woman. Like I said, she got most of her joy from being around me and my brother and the grandkids and cooking, and food is what really brought our families together.
She was very traditional Korean mother. She was big on education for her children, for her grandchildren. She was big on being respectful, and at the same time, she was very direct. You know, she didn't sugarcoat a lot of things, but a very strong Korean cultured woman is how I remember my mother.
Well, my mother was selfless, right? It was about others. It was less about her. She always tell you she'll be okay. Don't worry about me. She didn't ask or need for much. She didn't have much either, but she gave all that she did have. They had not yet identified the bodies, but I think at that point they had released that the 4 women were Korean women. I called the medical examiner, and that's when she told me that they have somebody down there with my mother's name and birthday. And I think at that same moment, my brother was calling to check on me and to see if I heard anything, and I had literally just found out, and he was calling. And he tells me he remembers what I said, and that it's gonna play in his head forever, you know?
Yeah. He said, Lamont, it was her.
It was my mama. Some people ask, am I black and Korean? I'm black and Korean, right? I have an African-American father and a Korean mother. Right. And my mother was very adamant about knowing both, right? I didn't have to do one exclusively without the other. One was not more valuable than the other. Again, she was very much conscious of what I looked like aesthetically on the outside, what me and my brother looked like. Again, African-American presenting. She also recognized we grew up in America. And discrimination against Asians and African Americans is a part of the American fabric, right? So this is not new.
My mother she know we faced it. We faced discrimination on both sides growing up. You know, there have been some people we were around that didn't like her Asian culture or her Asian children. And then at the same time, there were other groups that didn't like the brown color of the skin, black culture of us. But my mom was always an advocate of treating people right. Always not letting us know not to be embarrassed of who we were. Always ready to stand up and speak about discrimination if she saw you actively discriminating. Now you can see how great my mother was. You sure can.
Venerable Aparekke Punyasiri of Maithree Vihara in Sun Valley, California, will now chant the 3 refuges in Pali, along with a group of Theravada monastics. After we take refuge in the triple gem of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, Reverend Duncan Ryuken Williams of Zenshuji Soto Mission in Little Tokyo, Los Angeles, will deliver the Hyobyakumon, a pronouncement before the Buddha about the intention of today's gathering.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami, dhammam saranam gacchami, sangham saranam gacchami, dutiyampi buddham saranam gacchami, dutiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami, dutiyampi sangham saranam gacchami, tatiyampi buddham saranam gacchami, tatiyampi dhammam saranam gacchami, tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami.
The Buddha taught that even if you scour the world, there's not a single person who has not experienced loss from the death of someone they love. This sense of loss is only compounded when a loved one passes away suddenly or violently. 49 days ago, 8 families experienced this aggravated sense of grief when 8 people, 6 of them Asian women, were shot and killed in the Atlanta, Georgia area. We gather today because only through joining together do we know that we are not alone. In ceremony, loss can be transformed into connection, including connection with those we believe are absent. The Buddha himself told his community just before he died that while he would no longer be physically present, he would still be with them through his teaching and his example. Indeed, the Buddha is with us in this present moment. He is here through his teachings, which links the past to the present and each of us to one another. Death may be thought of as a loss, but in the customary 49 days of mourning after a person's passing, we come to learn from the deceased just how present they are in our hearts and minds, our bones and marrow. Like the Buddha, they teach us that our lives are inextricably interlinked. This gathering was prompted by the life and death of Yong Ae Yue, a devout Korean American Buddhist whose life was cut short at the aromatherapy spa in Atlanta. Her 2 sons remember her as a selfless person who stood up against discrimination and always advocated for treating people right. She reminds us that the antidote to a government's confused and deluded mind is the wisdom to see things clearly. Her offering to the nation includes this very gathering, which brings together an American Sangha from many lineages and many regions of our country. As with the life, death, and memory of George Floyd, we learn that the power of one life can touch the hearts of so many. Ignorance and confusion were also the root causes that led to the killing of Tommy Lê, a Vietnamese American who was shot to death by police in Seattle. Police claimed that Tommy held a knife in his hands. Those claims were proven to be false. He was simply knocking on a door with a pen. During his 49th day Buddhist ceremony, Tommy's family placed his photo on the temple altar, alongside photos of dozens more people who had passed on, firm in their belief that ceremony is not about one life, but about many lives in spiritual community. That through the life of Tommy Lê, we are reminded of Dante Wright, shot by police in Minnesota during a routine traffic stop 3 weeks ago. The police officer claimed she intended to use a taser on him instead of a pistol. Tommy and Dante become present every time we work to provide safety to all members of our community in wiser and more compassionate ways. This poison of ignorance runs deep. If we go back in time to the World War II era, we find an entire ethnic group, including members of this very temple where we are holding our ceremony now, targeted out of ignorance. Japanese American Buddhists constituted the largest Buddhist community in the United States at the time of the Pearl Harbor attack. Temples were under government surveillance, priests arrested by the FBI as threats to national security, and over 120,000 Japanese American community members were eventually herded into America's concentration camps because of our faith and our race. Among those incarcerated in this place was Kane Saburo Oshima, taken from his home in Kona, Hawaii, and shot by a U.S. Army guard in the back of his neck at the Fort Sill internment camp in Oklahoma. He stood at the fence line, surrounded by barbed wire, wishing only to be reunited with his wife and 11 children who held his funeral at the Daifukuji Soto mission. Today, his granddaughter, who serves as the Buddhist priest of that very temple, joins us in ceremony. Kanesaburo Oshima teaches us about how the Buddhist virtues of patience and persistence extends beyond generations. This lineage of racial hurt sometimes moves beyond mere ignorance and confusion to hostility and even hatred. We recall the name Vicha Ratanapakdi, our Thai Buddhist immigrant elder, assaulted while taking his daily walk in his San Francisco neighborhood. We feel the impact of his head hitting the pavement. We reel from the unprovoked, senseless assaults that have been inflicted on Ratanapakdee and so many of our Asian American community seniors in recent months. On the same streets, his daughter had been spat on by people as they accused her of bringing COVID to this country. The anti-Asian animus and violence is repeated as we recall Amarjit Sekon, whose life was cut short by bullets at her workplace, the FedEx warehouse in Indianapolis, where 6 like her constituted the majority of the workforce. She left behind 2 sons who spoke of her working countless hours a week so she could provide food for everyone in the house. Wicha Ratanapakdee's daughter hoped that telling her immigrant father's story might protect others, and we feel his and Amarjit Sekon's presence today as a prayer and talisman against harm for all sentient beings. Religio-racial hostility and outright hatred, also the result of delusion, runs deep in American history. On Super Bowl Sunday 1996, Tim Min Lee was in line skating at a tennis court in Tustin, California, while visiting his family. Since graduating from UCLA and Georgetown, he had hoped one day to serve as the Vietnamese American ambassador to Vietnam, his devout Buddhist family's ancestral land. We still recoil as we remember his death at the hands of an avowed white supremacist who bragged in a letter about this murder enacted on behalf of a racist ideology. His brother recalls reading and almost fully memorizing that letter and returning to the site of the murder, unable to comprehend the hatred that ended Lee's life. That hatred is old as the earliest records of American Buddhist history, established in our nation by Chinese immigrants. Among them, we recall Xia Bunren, who was among 28 Chinese miners massacred in Rock Springs, Wyoming in 1885 by those who believed that Chinese immigrants were taking jobs away from white miners. He was among those found dead in a burnt-out hut next to the Buddha-Taoist temple. His community was branded with the slur words, the heathen Chinese, and deemed a racially unassimilable and religiously unacceptable community in America. We feel these burning wounds even today. Tien Min Lee and Xia Bunren's lives have been teaching all of us how to hold ourselves with dignity in the face of supremacist and exclusionary ideologies. The poisons of ignorance, greed, and hatred have precipitously ended the lives of so many. We gather together to provide an antidote, wisdom to heal ignorance, loving kindness to heal hatred, and generosity to heal greed. This powerful medicine is available to us right whenever the need arises. The Black abolitionist Frederick Douglass provided a powerful diagnosis and healing when he insisted in a speech that America is a composite nation. A former enslaved person himself, he gave a speech nearly 20 years before Xia Bunren's death about the rising agitation nationwide against the Chinese American community and how the struggle for emancipation was interlinked to immigrant inclusion. The America he envisioned was one that welcomed the Chinese and immigrants from a multitude of races and faiths to the duties of citizenship, a vision of America that values multiplicity over singularity, hybridity over purity, and inclusivity over exclusivity. As we see ourselves in others, and others see us in them, we learn the lessons of those for whom we perform this ceremony. Together, we join today to repair the racial karma of this nation, because our destinies and freedoms are intertwined. And though the mountain of suffering is high, and the tears of pain fill the deepest oceans, our path compels us to rise up like a lotus flower above muddy waters. Medicine also comes from a saying attributed to Bodhidharma, Nanakorobi Yaoki, fall down 7 times, get up 8. At times, this means we come back to our breath when our mind wanders, or sit up straight when we slump off the meditation cushion. Other times, we return to our precepts and vows when we fall off the noble path. But sometimes, it requires us to gather. And today, we, the Sangha of the United States of America, have gathered to recall our interconnectedness, feel the presence of those who have gone before us, and to get back up. And though we may fall 1,000,000 times, we rise again 1,000,001 times in honor of our ancestors and our loved ones who have passed. May we gather.
Thank you, Reverend Williams. Bishop Noriaki Ito of Higashi Honganji, our host temple here in Los Angeles, will now share a Dharma message on Prajñā Pāramitā.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We here at Higashi Honganji are honored to host this memorial service and welcome all of the representatives of various temples who are participating. My father was the head priest here when this temple was built in 1976. We were able to serve together for a few years before he passed away in 1985. One of the lessons that I learned from him was regarding the 49th day service after the passing of a family member. Today, as you know, we gather on the 49th day after the tragedy in Atlanta on March 16th. Back in those days, many families asked to hold memorial services every 7th day from the date of passing to the 49th day service. My father told me that since there are 6 services preceding the 49th day, he spoke on the 6 Pāramitās, one for each week. The 6 Pāramitās, or perfections of awakening beings, are Dana, generosity; Śīla, appropriate conduct; Kshanti, patience; Virya, effort; Dhyana, meditation; and Prajñā, wisdom. I have chosen to share my thoughts on the Prajñā Pāramitā, on wisdom. It is to be able to see the world through the eyes of the Buddha's wisdom. It is to see things as they are and not through the lenses of our egos, our personal perspectives. The problems that we are experiencing today is due in large part to the self-centered views that collide with the views of others. In the Pure Land Shin Buddhist tradition, we are always encouraged to engage in self-examination. As ordinary beings afflicted with the 3 poisons of anger, greed, and ignorance, we come to the realization that we are no better than anyone else. In Japan, Prince Shotoku was the first aristocrat to embrace Buddhism and is revered as the father of Japanese Buddhism. His image is shown on the scroll behind me to your left. He is credited with establishing the first constitution. There is a passage in which he instructs both the leaders of the country and the citizens as to how to relate with each other. Each person has his own mind, and each mind has its own way. What another thinks is right, I think to be wrong. What I think is right, another thinks to be wrong. But I am no saint, and he is no fool. We are all common mortals. How can we tell good from evil? Both he and I are sometimes wise and sometimes foolish. So in his eyes, true wisdom is to realize that we are ordinary people who need the guidance of the Buddha Dharma to enable us to realize a world in which we can live together as friends. It is difficult not to condemn those who commit violence against others, but as Buddhists, we are encouraged to learn from every experience every relationship as we proceed on the path given to us by Shakyamuni Buddha and by all of the Buddhas that we honor and remember here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Ito. Sister Nghiem of Deer Park Monastery in Escondido, California, will now share a Dharma message on Śīla Pāramitā.
Breathing in, I know you are there. Breathing out, I am so happy. Dear most venerables, dear honorable friends, we are grateful to have this opportunity to come together as a beloved community, especially during these challenging times. It is imperative that we gather as a spiritual community to generate compassion and support for one another as we travel on this path of freedom and responsibility. As we care for our suffering and face the challenges confronting us, we remind ourselves that the way of understanding and compassion is the antidote to the fear, violence, and discrimination in this moment that we all have experienced personally, as a community, and as a nation. How can we cultivate understanding and compassion? One way is through the Buddhist practice of Śīla, or the ethical path of responsibility and accountability. Our teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, has reframed Śīla as mindfulness training, or put another way, as love in action. We train to love ourselves and to love others by being mindful of our actions. We train to generate the energy of mindfulness that helps us to be careful of our three karmic actions of body, speech, and mind in our daily life. When we are mindful of what is going on in our bodies, our feelings, or our minds, and in the world, we can better avoid doing harm to ourselves and others. The mindfulness trainings protect us, our families, and our society. When we are mindful, we can see that by refraining from acting out of hatred and anger, we can reduce the harm done to ourselves and others. The first training is to protect life, to decrease violence towards oneself and others. It is not just not to harm, but to actively promote and respect all forms of life, including respecting the diverse choices of others on how to live and be in the world. The second training is to practice social justice, generosity, not stealing, and not exploiting other living beings by means of social structures and policies that rob them of their livelihoods, whether these are explicit or implicit. The third training is the practice of responsible sexual behavior in order to protect individuals, couples, families, and children. Sexual energy without love and understanding has the potential to harm and exploit others. The fourth training is the practice of deep listening and loving speech to restore communication and bring about reconciliation and mutual respect for each other's difference of view. How can we maintain openness and listen to others when we disagree with what is being shared? How can we share our particular truth without imposing our views on others? This is the challenge of our media-dominant culture. The fifth training is about mindful consumption, to refrain from bringing toxins into our body or mind. As our world becomes more globalized and undeniably interwoven, we must continue to gather together to discuss and find a global ethic that can help guide society and promote mutual understanding and respect of one another despite our differences in views, beliefs, and way of living. We are gathered today because we know that the way forward is not to retreat to our own safety and comfort and ignore what is happening to our communities, to others, and to our fellow Earth citizens, but rather because we are convinced that the path of understanding and compassion is the way forward, not just for humankind, but for all species on this precious planet.
Thank you, Sister Nghiem. On the altar before us are 6 memorial tablets bearing the names of Yong Ae Yue, Wicha Ratanapakdi, Tommy Lei, Tien Min Lee, Kanesaburo Oshima, and Sia Banning. These 6 individuals are just some of the many Asian American Buddhists killed in acts of violence from the 19th century to the present. Because the history of systemic anti-Asian violence in the US includes erasure, many of the names of those killed have not been documented. We say the names of these 6 individuals while acknowledging and honoring the many other names not on the altar today. Grief and loss connect us across different ethnic and spiritual communities. The 7th central tablet commemorates all people who have lost their lives due to racial and religious animus.
We will now be making offerings of light and incense in front of these memorial tablets. The offerings will be accompanied by the chanting of the Heart Sutra, the recitation of the names on the memorial tablets, and a dedication of merit to the deceased, led by Venerable Hui Dong of Foguanshan Śīla Temple and Bante Chao Chu of Rosemead Buddhist Monastery. We invite you to join us by making your own offerings of light, flowers, or incense at this time, and by showing your respect in silence, or by reciting the names that will appear on the screen shortly.
A Prayer for Victims of Hate Crimes by Venerable Master Xing. O great compassionate Buddha, please listen to the serious thoughts of your disciples. Bloody and violent incidents have continuously occurred in the country. Brutal and senseless actions have spread into people's lives. Many Asian and Asian Americans have been attacked or even lost their lives. People from all races and ethnicities now live in fear and worry. Today, we gather before you to pray for all victims of hate crimes who have senselessly lost their lives, including Yong Ae Yue, Vicha Ratnapakdi, Tommy Lay, Tianmin Li, Kanesaburo Oshima, Seben Ning, as well as all beings who have lost their lives through racial and religious animus. O great compassionate Buddha, may you shine your pure radiance upon them and accept them through your compassionate vows. May the sacred assembly receive them upon a golden dais and instantly guide them to the Pure Land. May they soon see the Buddha, hear the Dharma, and realize their Buddha nature. we pray to you, Buddha, and the sacred assembly. Please also bless the survivors to live in peace, without fear and resentment, to live in abundance, without worry and regret, to live in happiness and receive protection of the sacred ones. O great compassionate Buddha, we also pray for those who committed the crimes. They are also victims of their own heinous deeds. For hatred has clouded their thoughts. Resentment has blinded their eyes. Anger has controlled their behaviors. Greed has filled their minds. Their human nature no longer has a virtue of tolerance. Their hearts no longer have a dignity of life. O Buddha, please let compassion calm their thoughts. Please let wisdom open their eyes. Please let gratitude reform their behaviors. Please let joy free their hateful minds. May you bless all people in the world, so that we may all understand that my life and the lives of others are all interconnected, that hateful thoughts, hateful words, and hateful actions cannot change the situation, but only contaminate people's minds. Hateful behaviors cannot bring justice to the world, but only make one suffer from one's own misdeeds. May we all understand, only respect can truly improve relationships. Only patience is the best demonstration of courage and strength. Only love and compassion can bring solutions to crises. May we all extinguish vengeful and violent behaviors. May we all eradicate anger and hateful thoughts. May we all walk out of the shadow of violence. May we all live in peace with compassionate hearts. May the world be replete with kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. May the world be filled with grace, respect, courage, and wisdom. O great compassionate Buddha, please accept our sincerest prayer. O great compassionate Buddha, please accept our sincerest prayer.
Yeah.
Bhante Sanata Vihari of the Sarat Chandra Buddhist Center in North Hollywood, California, will now share a Dharma message on Kshanti Pāramitā. Bhante's message will be delivered in Spanish. Please view the closed captioning at the bottom of your screen for an English translation.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Hola y saludos venerables, hermanos y hermanas en Dhamma. De solidaridad con nuestros hermanos y hermanas de la comunidad asiática. Los acontecimientos recientes nos obligan a hacer lo que es más difícil de hacer, que es la práctica de Khanti, la paciencia. En una ocasión, el bienaventurado dijo, Khanti paramam tapo titikka nibbanam paramam vadanti buddha, lo que significa, la mayor austeridad es la paciencia y la tolerancia. Nibbana supremo, dijo el Buda. Permíteme aclarar. La paciencia no es cumplimiento, ni es una llamada a la inacción. Sin embargo, es un esfuerzo ver las cosas con claridad en una situación difícil. La paciencia nos permite aplicar la sabiduría y la compasión ante lo insoportable. Nos da la oportunidad de responder con amabilidad en lugar de reaccionar inconscientemente. Por ejemplo, en el Samyutta Nikaya, el Buda habla de una antigua batalla entre los dioses y los titanes, durante lo cual los dioses salieron victoriosos y el rey de los titanes, Vipachiti, fue capturado y encarcelado. Cuando el rey de los dioses, Saka, visitó a Vipachiti en prisión, Vipachiti abusó de él y lo reprendió con palabras duras y groseras, a las que Saka no respondió de la misma manera. Posteriormente, el chofer de Saka le preguntó a Saka sobre esto, expresando su preocupación de que algunos verían la respuesta de Saka como un signo de miedo y debilidad. Saka respondió, no es por miedo ni por debilidad que soy paciente con Vipachiti. ¿Cómo puede una persona sabia como yo participar en combate con un tonto? De metas que culminan en el propio bien, ninguno se encuentra mejor que la paciencia. El que paga con ira a un hombre enojado, de ese modo empeora las cosas para él. No pagar con ira al hombre enojado, uno gana una batalla difícil de ganar. Practica por el bienestar de ambos, el suyo y el del otro. Cuando, sabiendo que su enemigo está enojado, mantiene conscientemente su paz. Cuando logre la cura de ambos, el suyo y el del otro, la gente que lo considera un tonto son inexpertos en el Dhamma. El Buda, después de compartir este relato con sus discípulos, elogió a Saka por su paciencia y amabilidad. Sé que puede parecer imposible e incluso ridículo proponer la paciencia como respuesta ante todo este odio que estamos experimentando. Pero yo creo que sí se puede. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante Sanata Vihari. We would now like to share a pre-recorded Dharma message on Dhyana Pāramitā from Bishop Myoke Caine-Barrett of Myoken-ji Temple, Nichiren Buddhist Sangha of Texas in Houston. Bishop Caine-Barrett regrets that she cannot join us in person for today's ceremony.
Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Greetings, dear family of the Dharma, and all friends and allies around the globe. We are experiencing great uncertainty and perhaps great anxiety as our communities continue to be confronted by the three poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance. As practitioners, we can only turn to our various ways of practice to be able to walk the path of Dharma with confidence, calmness, and poise. The Pāramitā of meditation is the foundation of wisdom and the way to cut through the illusions of ego and thinking of ourselves as separate from other beings. Meditation allows us to focus and master our minds rather than have our minds be our master. In the practice of contemplation, the gift of meditation is the ability to focus the mind on a single point of concentration in order to be free from distractions. Through calming the activity of mind in meditation, we can establish the ground for realizing insight and wisdom. Over time, we come to embody the very qualities that the Buddha has: great compassion, gentleness, and patience, and the ability to see the voidness of all things. I unite with you today as an Asian American who is also of African American descent. I invoke all our ancestors who have worked together and given so much so that today we can stand together in solidarity as one human family. We are learning each other's stories and trials. We know each other's victories and losses. We should never forget we are all the Buddha's children, embraced by his great love and wisdom, which allow us to follow the path of compassion and mercy. The Buddha said, "I am always thinking, how shall I cause all living beings to enter into the unsurpassed way and quickly become Buddhas?" Let that be our guiding principle as we walk together and purify the Buddha's land. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo.
Thank you, Bishop Caine-Barrett. On the altar before us is a kintsugi lotus, handcrafted especially for our ceremony today by James Okumura. Kintsugi is the Japanese art of repairing broken ceramics by mending the fractures with golden lacquer. The lotus flower, rising clean from muddy roots, symbolizes the purity and potential of the Buddha's awakening. The cracks in this kintsugi lotus will now be gilded by several of our monastics in attendance, transforming brokenness into beauty.
The work of repairing our communities requires remembering rather than hiding the ways in which we've been hurt. The careful rejoining process of kintsugi embodies our collective efforts to heal the wounds of racism and religious bigotry. The gilding of the kintsugi lotus will be accompanied by the chanting of the Heart Sutra in Korean by a delegation from the Jogye order, led by Venerable Myokyong of Korean Sa Buddhist Temple, followed by the chanting in Tibetan of Jampe Kuzuk and Ngomun, led by Geshe Punso, Venerable Tenzin Tarpa, and Venerable Tenzin Lekshe of Gaden Shotse Tupten Dargye Ling.
신경관자지구성심만여바라
Reverend Christina Moon of Daihonzan Chozenji International Zen Dojo in Honolulu, Hawaii, will now share a Dharma message on Virya Pāramitā.
It's a great honor that I get to speak today amongst this community of Asian American spiritual leaders about the Pāramitā of Virya. There's a lot we want to accomplish today in terms of remembrance and community building, so my Dharma talk is going to be brief. But since Virya figures very prominently at Daihonzan Chozenji, the Rinzai Zen temple and dojo where I live in Hawaii, I think I can share some understanding quickly and succinctly. In the original Sanskrit, the Pāramitā of Virya means vigor, effort, and diligence. For today's purposes, let's think of it as spiritual strength. Out of the 6 Pāramitas, many consider Virya, or spiritual strength, to be foundational. Without it, the other paramitas of generosity, patience, ethics, wisdom, or concentration fall flat. Without strength, our patience fizzles, our concentration is dull, and our ability to act ethically withers in the face of hardship or severe consequences. Our entire struggle to realize our true selves and our Buddha nature relies on our foundation of spiritual strength. We clearly need strength in moments like these to help us forge a path ahead through racism, patriarchy, and other oppressions and inequities. But we also need it to meet the suffering caused by injustice or just the vicissitudes of life with compassion. Compassion. Nobody would dispute that what the world needs today is more compassion. But consider what compassion really means. The Latin roots of the word compassion are calm and passion. Calm means with. Passion, as in the passion of the Christ, means to suffer. So compassion means to suffer with. To suffer with others, perhaps even in the hardest moments of their lives, requires tremendous spiritual strength. After an exhausting year, many are probably wondering, where can we find such spiritual strength? Well, we can start right here. In temples and dojos like this, here we can forge our strength through the methods passed down to us, teacher to student, over 2,000 years. We can learn how to take the hard experiences in our lives and turn them into opportunities for growth. We can train ourselves to transcend the dualism and separation that leads to suffering. In a Buddhist temple like this, we can look to Kannon and Furomyo with their many eyes, many arms, and weapons. transcendent Buddhist archetypes of spiritual strength. But more importantly, we need only look around, finding examples of spiritual strength in our families and ancestors who risked everything to build a brighter future. Examples like Tan Xiaojie, Feng Daoyou, Hyun Jung Grant, Park Sun Chong, Kim Sun Cha, and Yong Ae. The strength they had to make America their home, working multiple jobs and navigating a new world for the sake of their families, was tremendous. Let us commit to matching their spiritual strength, their vidya, today and every day to come as we remember and honor them. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Moon. Dr. Larry Ward of the Lotus Institute will now share a Dharma message on Dana Pāramitā.
My name is Larry Ward. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am very honored to be with you today. The practice of giving is universally recognized throughout the world in all of humanity as a true virtue. The word dana finds its roots in Buddhism and Jainism and Hinduism and even into our own lives. It is in Sanskrit and Pali that I noticed the beauty of generosity, the power of generosity or giving. In this sense, generosity serves as a deep action that can water the seeds of wisdom and compassion in us and assist us in our own spiritual and social development. This giving rises out of our own Buddha nature, which is inherent in each of us. To give without seeking a reward is part of the Bodhisattva vow and path. When we practice dana, when we practice giving, it provides and creates a ground of merit that can rescue us all. It can create the fields of wellness and justice and harmony. Now, this nation and many centuries before, as you know, and it has been repeated, the despicable physical acts of harm and brutality and incarceration and enslavement still continue today. And so our dana seed, our dana tree within us needs to stand up. The pain and resistance our ancestors have experienced and we continue to experience as non-white people in this land causes us to recognize an illness we hardly understand. Really confused about how someone could hate so much, be brutal so much, so unkind, so callous. It is stunning to our imagination. At least it is to mine. Every time somebody tries to kill me, which has happened a couple of times, I'm still shocked. Now, if you knew me, I can understand why you might be irritated with me. But not to know me, not to know you, not to dare to love you is a tragedy. The Buddha Dharma invites us to embody the stillness in the wise action of giving. And yes, legal actions are important, laws are important, social and structural accountability is important, but when we look deeper within ourselves and among ourselves, if we do not realize our kinship, deeper than skin, deeper than language, deeper than nation, I mean our kinship in true emptiness. That kinship. If we are able to, enough of us are able to recover and touch that wellspring of kinship that exists beyond time and space, we may realize a breakthrough that we're all praying for. I trust this breakthrough lies in the path of the Buddha Dharma as I understand it, and I keep learning it. Dana includes many gifts of generosity. And in Japan, one of the phrases I really got inspired by, that Dana begins with deep appreciation. I never looked at generosity that way before, so I want to thank your ancestors for putting that framework underneath generosity, which for me means coming home and being grateful for my own life. Being grateful that I have something to share, and being grateful and appreciating my own willingness to share it and your willingness to receive a deep appreciation. Now, Dana in our tradition has been described in several kinds of ways: food, medicine, shelter, protection from harm. In many other ways, it's been described. But the highest gift of generosity is the gift of the Dharma, is the Dharma itself, is the true teaching itself. But the true teaching is meaningless without true practice. So our teaching and practice must be embodied fully, and then we can touch the joy that the Buddha knows. Another name for generosity, another way to think of generosity, is it's a practice of the Brahmaviharas, of loving kindness and compassion and sympathetic joy and equanimity. We have so much work to do, especially with the last three. Some of us are just learning how to have joy in your joy. What a practice to be joyful in someone else's joy. We have yet to learn this completely in our individual and certainly in our collective lives. And of course, equanimity, which is the ground of transformation. And I say I am here because I wanted to be here. I came here to stand with you, with my ancestors, to love you deeply. Beyond time, beyond space. I cry with you as I have shed tears every day for my ancestors and your ancestors, past, present, and future. And moreover, I'm willing to take the journey of healing and transforming our shared grief so that we may turn our 100,000 talents into transforming this world and creating a society, however impermanent and temporary it will always be, that is grounded in the good. The blue sky, I practice in my heart to have a sky that is blue and wide, so large that I can hold your pain, so large I can hold your joy, and so large I can hold your goodness at the core of your being as my own.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. พระมหาฤเดชวงศ์ศรีชา Abbot of Wat Pratat Panom of America in Yucca Valley, California, will now lead us in a Aparekke ritual. This protective ceremony will include the recitation of the Ratana Sutta by a group of Theravada monastics as the Sangha gathered here today process in pairs out of the main hall.
The two long white threads emanating from the altar will be empowered with the blessings of these chants. These cords weave together the Buddha as represented on the altar, the Dharma as manifest in the Aparekke chants, and the collective protection and interconnectedness of everyone participating in this event, in person and online. These threads will guide us as we leave this space to share our aspirations for peace and healing with the world.
Kesavayang Ratanang Paniyatang Nano Samba Aditatha Katena Yidam Pibode Ratana Paniyatang Ete Nasajena Suva Tihotu Kayang Virakang Amatang Paniyatang Chakha Sakaya Muni Samma Hito Na Te Na Dhamme Na Samma Tiken Jidam Pidam Me Ratana Panitang Ete Na Sa Jena Suva Tihotu Yam Bodha Seto Pariva Na Yeso Jen Samadhima Dorikan Yamahu Samadhina Tena Samona Chati Idam Pidam Me Ratanang Panitang Tena Sajena Sawati Hotu Ye Pokala Atasatam Jatari Etani Yokani Honti Teda Kinaya Sukata Sasa Ete Sundinani Mahapalani Idam Pisangke Ratanang Panitang Etena Nasavati Hotu Yeso Payota Manasadan He Nane Kamino Kotamasa Sanam Hite Patipata Amata Halada Mudane Puting Bonchamana Idam Pisangke Ratana Panitang Ete Nasa Jena Suva Tihotu Kienang Purana Nawang Nadisa Pawang Virata Jeta Yatike Pawasami Pekina Piechane Chantane Pandite Rayathayam Padipo Idam Pisangke Panitang Etena Sajena Suva Tihotu Yani Daputani Sama Katani Pumani Va Yani Va Antaleke Tata Kata Deva Mano สัพพุจิตังบุตตังธัมมังสามัสสวะติโหตุยานิดาปุตตานิสัมมาตานิบุมมานิวายานิวะตะเลเกตถากตังเดวมนุสัพพุสิตังธัมมังธัมมังสามัสสวะติโหตุยานิดาปุตตานิสัมมาคตานิปุมมานิวะยานิวะอันตะเลเกตถากตังเดวมนุสัพพุสิตังสังฆังนามาสามัสสวะติโหตุ